Welcome to the Heretics Review with Nick and Andrew, special guest James.
Hello, humans.
And to get right into it, today we're going to review the Supreme Court, SCOTUS. And basically, they've made a lot of fairly controversial rulings recently. And the one that kind of interests me, amongst others, not that's the only one, is what they did in the case of Kennedy versus Bremerton School District. In this case, basically, this gentleman here, who is, I'm kind of trying to circle with the mouse in the middle of that, that's the Coach Joe, Praying Joe. And as you can see, and this is what's described in the Supreme Court brief or decision, he is conducting a short, personal, private prayer. So the background of this case is basically that after the game is over, he goes to the 50-yard line. And actually, if you read through it, it says at one point, he actually left the school and didn't conduct his prayer at the 50-yard line, but then turned his car around because he felt compelled by God to go to the 50-yard line and conduct his prayer. In that case, he did it by himself. There was no one else there. But it's become such an event that these prayers are actually held over the loudspeaker at the school. And basically, they have become, over the course of years, an institution. So as soon as the game's over, sometimes even the opposing team also meets. As you can see, there's all kinds of other high school kids there and staff members. This is supposedly on his own time, and therefore doesn't interfere with his normal duties. And the Supreme Court has basically said that this is a constitutional exercise of his freedom of speech and does not violate the Establishment Clause. Establishment Clause basically says that the government cannot fund any effort that is religious in nature, nor can it oppose any effort that is religious in nature. So it has to remain neutral, effectively. So the Supreme Court has said that this, what we're looking at right there in the background, is neutral. And so that's kind of what we're talking about today. Now, James, I know that you're kind of bringing a perspective of this as a member of the humanist. I don't want to get it wrong. What's the actual name of this?
You can just refer to me as a humanist. I'm not
humanist.
I'm not representing anybody here. I'm just representing myself. So
fair enough. And I know, Nick, that your background is as a Christian, and me, I'm kind of in the middle. I'm agnostic. I was raised Christian, but so I'm very knowledgeable about Christianity, but I don't actually have a particular bent right now. So I'm kind of in the middle. I'm like, let's see, hold on, a little more towards the James side. But I appreciate the Bible. I think that there's nothing wrong with it. There's a lot of very interesting things. I sometimes quote scripture. I'm like one of the only non-Christians I know that actually in my daily life quote scripture. So that being said, let's kind of start with James. Would you categorize what we're looking at in that picture as a short, private, personal prayer?
I mean, given that it's a picture, it's hard to tell if it's short, but there's definitely quite a gathering there. I question too, is this actually during the sporting event, or is this after it's considered over?
No, it's afterwards. So the game is over, and upon the cessation of the game, so this is officially end of the school day. There's no more school. Everyone's going to go home at this point, but rather than going home, they meet at the 50-yard line, have their prayer, and then go home. So that's what's occurring right now.
Honestly, it's kind of a tricky thing, because he is, if he's taken his coach hat off at this point, he is no longer, representing himself as a coach, as a teacher. I think that would be fine, but I think in this setting, it's really hard not to see that. It's hard not to believe that he's not still representing himself as a coach and giving this prayer. And the real issue that I have with it is it's the repercussions, not just the legal part of it, but let's say that you have a kid that's on this football team who happens to be, a Satanist or an atheist, and decides not to pray with these other kids. I mean, how does that affect the team cohesion? Like, how does that make that individual look compared to the rest of them?
Well, and then in the terms of look, you would think that that the way that in a team, right, the whole point of team, right, is that unity and cooperation.
Yeah.
So in that case where they don't look a certain way, this also then means or reflects upon their team assignments. So for example, do they get the starting job or do they not get the starting job? Is that purely based on their athletic ability, or is it based upon a cultural element? So they're fitting in with the team helps them become the team captain. For example, if you were the team captain, could you avoid this, what we're looking at? Could you be the team captain and not attend this?
I honestly don't think you could. I mean, people will say that I wouldn't hold anyone against it, hold this against them to not participate. But in reality, we all have biases that are, in the back of our mind that we just act upon without really thinking about it. So I have a hard time believing that it would not affect that player's ability.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, for me, coming from a Buddhist background growing up, and then becoming an atheist, and then becoming a Christian, I don't agree with public shows of faith like this, especially in the sense that it's, the Bible does tell you to go into your own little corner when you pray to God and not to make a public showing of it, because this is all for the camera. If he was really concerned about professing his faith, he wouldn't do it to, I guess, lift himself up or in any way like this. But, having said that, just taking a look at this picture, I don't know who posted this picture or whatever, but it doesn't look like it's the majority of the team. Actually, it looks like it's less than the majority of the team. I think it's a handful of players there. So I would be suspect in wondering, out of the 53-man roster, or however many people there are on that team there, if this is the majority of the team. I would say this is probably 1/10 of the team, unless of course this is a private school, which then it doesn't really matter, right? But this is a public school, and I would say that this is probably like 10% of the team at most. You can see a bunch of people in the background there, a lot more people standing up and just kind of like looking at them than praying, actually. So while I do agree with you, James, I do agree that, one should never push their opinions or faith or anything like that as fact to another person. And I'm very careful not to, I guess, force my views on somebody else, because that's just not the American way, or it shouldn't be. But I see here in this picture, if I'm just looking at it objectively here, I'd say like 10 people, maybe 15.
Well, how many people are behind the camera though?
I don't know. It looks to me like a lot more people.
Yeah, the images is cut off. This isn't necessarily the full picture.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure how many, but from what I see there, it doesn't look like the whole team. I could be wrong. I don't know what the situation is. That's the first point. And the second point is, is this a willing behavior? Is this like everyone in that picture is doing it willingly? And again, I do agree with you. There's always bias, right? I mean, I think that everyone on here has experienced bias in a negative way. So I do agree with that. And so, but having said that, what is the issue at hand here? What is the issue at hand here? Is it wrong of the coach there? And I use the term wrong very loosely here. Is it wrong of the coach to do this?
And I mean, at what level are we talking? Like, legally, because I think that's been settled, but like as far as like the morale of the team, I'm not sure this is a great thing, and unless you already had 100% buy-in from the team, which I would doubt.
Well, let's go back to the legal thing though. I'm not sure that's so settled. So the Supreme Court rules on it and says that this is a correct expression of his free expression. But in order to do that, they lie, right? So the question is, how valid is a verdict that's based on what is, I think, an apparent lie? So there's nothing private about this prayer. It's certainly not personal. So if they're going to base this on as his personal expression of prayer, that's clearly not what's happening here. So they made a verdict, but they made a verdict because we have 5 people or possibly 6 on the Supreme Court who are theocrats, and they can say whatever they want. Supreme Court has said whatever they want in the past. They ruled on segregation. They ruled on that Black people are not citizens. They ruled on all kinds of things, because if you get enough crazy people on that bench, and if we can see the process, we see like Trump nominates 3 of these crazy people. And so he's clearly doing it purely on an ideological basis. I don't think anyone's kidding themselves that you're going up to Supreme Court because you are, a spectacular legal mind. What we're seeing here is not spectacular legal minds. These are not geniuses. These are theocrats. So they are, and you can tell this because they're using a lie to win their case. They're saying that this is a personal private prayer, that this is an exercise of personal freedom of, religious freedom of speech, which it is not, because he's on school property. So as a taxpayer, and I don't live in Bremerton, so it's not me personally, but if I lived in Bremerton, I paid for that field. I do not give my permission as a taxpayer for you to hold a religious service on my field. That's not acceptable.
Well, what about there are churches that will organize at a school. They'll pay a fee to utilize the facilities, but it's not during school hours. Is that
okay?
Is that different, or
it is a little bit different, possibly? So first off, it's not for doing school hours, but it's also via some degree of voter consent. So the school has a school board. You vote for the school board. You can put people in place. They make deals, and maybe they make a deal. For example, I took a driving test. I obviously sped. I broke the law, and I got a ticket. In order to get rid of the ticket, I had to go to driving school, and that driving school was actually at a high school that they rented out after hours, so that I could go to a driving school. Okay. So the school has these arrangements to rent out the school buildings for private use, but that's an arrangement that's made at least via some degree of voter consent, that the school board agrees to these things. So for example, if the school board did not agree to this use of prayer in the school, then they could say no. But in this case, Supreme Court saying, you can't say no. He has to have the right to do his religious service in the middle of a football field paid for by taxpayers. And there's absolutely nothing that those taxpayers can do to stop him. Nothing. They can't vote him out. They can't vote the entire school board out. They can't replace the principal. They can't replace the school district. There's nothing at all that they can do, because this is his constitutional right. So that would leave me to believe that I could hold a service in any school building, any federal building, any state building I want to. I could just march in there with my followers and hold a service right in the middle of a courthouse, because clearly this guy has the right to do it. Why wouldn't I have the right to do the same thing in the middle of the DMV?
Yeah, I can't wait for the Satanists to pull that one off.
Right?
I'm sure it'll be glorious.
Yeah, so I do agree with you regarding the performing this service, because at this point now it's become a religious service, right? It's after every game or something like this. But just backtracking, you actually said some powerful, opinionated things about the Supreme Court there, and I wanted to support that. And it's that, well, let me put it this way. I don't know if it's a theocracy or not. I've seen some theocracies, and so I wouldn't go so far as to say that it's a theocracy. However, I do believe that it is a very utilitarianistic branch of government, and throughout history, we know that utilitarianism is evil. And we've seen this over and over again. It's even a hard word for me to say. Okay. So, and I'm pretty sure I can say a lot of words.
Oh
But
my
that is
God.
an evil concept, utilitarianism. Okay. Because you're saying here that if the majority rules, then that means that, if you have 9 players and 5 of them say yes, that means that the 4 of them get rejected. So that is a very, very harsh, especially when you're putting it into
Wait.
these. What was it that you said? 5 kings?
Hold on. Are you arguing against utilitarianism or democracy? I'm confused at this point.
Same.
So it sounds like you're arguing.
I'm arguing
for the-
against. I'm saying that the SCOTUS is a utilitarian regime.
I'm not sure I would agree
I'm
with
not
that.
sure I follow that. Yeah, that doesn't. Now you might be
Because
going
that is
towards
the definition of utilitarian, right? Utilitarianism is
the greatest
a
good for the
form or a
greatest number of
concept.
people.
No, it's a form of concept that actually says that the majority rules. That is the
That's-
concept of it.
It's
Now,
more
the
of a
other thing that
pure
you add to it,
democracy.
the
It's
other thing that you
democracy,
add,
yeah.
no, democracy is actually a little bit different. Democracy is actually a little bit different. Utilitarianism is the majority rules. And democracy is based on the concept of not
No,
popular voting. It's
No.
based on the
It's
concept of votes.
it's definitely not though.
Election.
The utilitarianism is the greatest good for the greatest number of people.
No,
That's
it's actually not. That is
Okay.
a popular way. That is a popular way of
You
saying it,
control
but
the
it's
screen
not
there,
the case.
Andrews.
It's not. It's not the case. The utilitarianism is not the greatest good for the
Okay.
greatest amount of people. It is that this is the problem with utilitarianism. Okay, the problem with utilitarianism is that unless you are part of the majority, you will always be shortchanged.
So I feel like you're kind of hijacking here because, and I will actually read the dictionary
Yes.
definition.
Yes.
The doctrine that actions are right so long if they are useful or for the benefit of a majority. Is that how
Yes.
you're referring?
Yeah. So the majority out of 11, what happens to the other 5?
Right. So what you're talking about is tyranny of the majority.
Yes. And
Okay,
this is
sure.
exactly what democracy is by election. Okay. Now, is SCOTUS elected?
Technically, sort of.
Technically, sort of no.
It's like it's
Indirectly.
like
they are appointed. There's a
it's
big
like
difference between appointed and elected.
it's like
Okay?
democracy in Las Vegas. It's like you did vote for Trump, but you're not guaranteed a spot on the Supreme Court unless someone like dies. So you get like luck plus democracy
Yes.
equals
So-
SCOTUS.
So I do believe that the appointment of these Supreme Court justices is really, I think it should be changed. It should be more democratic. It should be left to the people and not to whoever is elected into the office, as every elected official should be, right? I mean, I do believe that if it's going to be truly democratic, that the Supreme Court justices should be elected.
All right. But back to
Having said
this
that,
topic.
5 out of 4. I mean, 5 out of, what is it? 5 out of
Basically
9?
6 out of 9.
6 out of 9. If they vote yes, then that's the rule. Come on.
Yeah,
And-
that's how it works.
but that
That's
is
how it
better.
works, and that's how utilitarianism works. Because those 6 believe that it is the greatest good for the greatest amount of people, right?
I'm not a fan of utilitarianism either, but back
It
to
is just
this
evil.
specific case.
Sorry,
Back to
that was
this
my
case.
little. I don't know what
Okay.
we're talking about now. We're talking about prayer.
There's one-
Talking about prayer.
I just want to add on that I think that the reason that it was stacked with the religious people that are in there is because those are the people that you can get excited to come out and vote.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I mean, can you get people excited about just pure, flat logic? So in this particular case, this is clearly illogical. That this is not a personal prayer. This is not a private prayer. This is done on school property, and it is certainly under the auspices of his employment as a coach. which then goes to his exerting religious influence in a public capacity. So I'm a public employee myself, and I don't have the ability to exhibit, if I were to exhibit or to push any kind of, religious activity in my capacity as a public employee, I would be fired.
Yeah.
Most
Now, let
people
me
would
ask
be
you-
fired in this circumstance.
Now, let me ask you this question, because I like to separate religion and everything else, but I've been told that I shouldn't, because religion is just one facet of humanity. And so, what is the difference between this and, say, someone who is philosophizing, like, talking about a political event, like somebody out there preaching about I don't know, libertarianism or something like this?
There's no real difference. No, I don't think there would be a difference. If he were conducting a Democrat a rally for the Democratic Party after school hours, it would be just the same. It
So
makes no difference. It's
so
what he,
so that means that if a if if a political officer or somebody coming to this public school and passing out flyers for their campaign or candidate, would that be against the law or for some kind?
well, it should absolutely be against it, because the point of this is that as a taxpayer, we pay for these facilities to be used for educational purposes, school. That's it, nothing else. So when there's extra stuff, that's just not what the taxpayers are asking for.
But is it because it's political, or because it's not the venue? Like, if someone was
Because it's
talking
not the
about
venue.
a specific, like, let's say they were talking about policy, and so it had not individual parties or individuals that are running, but a particular policy. Like, that I don't see how you can't allow that. That's going to be something that's going to come up in social studies or civics or.
Well, no, but I mean, I think it's clear whether something is being done for educational purposes. So, for example, you could have a political debate take place at school grounds, but it's clearly for educational purposes. It can be agreed to. People have some degree of input in this. So it's very difficult to look at that picture and say that there's any educational value in that picture.
Well, maybe he's teaching them how to pray. I mean, it's.
Which side are you on here, James?
Okay. Then in that case, he needs to call out, a Druidic prayer next, and then he needs to do a Islamic prayer after that. There's just that it's inappropriate, because he is acting in his capacity as a public employee, and he's doing so on a public space. If he wants to lead that group of people to the parking lot of the Church's Chicken next door and do this activity, he is more than welcome to do that. If he wants to just walk off and occupy a Walmart parking lot and do all of this in the Walmart parking lot, more power to him. Absolutely. I have no problem with that. But he is doing this as in his capacity as a coach. I mean, honestly, there's probably an ethical problem with him being a coach and a religious figure at the same time, because of the issue of indoctrination. So you mentioned, can people choose? These are minors. They cannot choose. They are, I mean, that's something we as a society recognize, that someone under the age of 18 isn't legally allowed to make a ton of choices in their life, because they're kids. I mean, I have kids and they suck at making choices. Nothing against my kids. They're beautiful, beautiful, wonderful people.
It's all kids. It's not just
it's all
kids.
So can I imagine that my child would be influenced in this kind of situation? Well, I hope they would not, but they certainly could be. I mean,
if you hadn't inoculated them, they might.
If
you hadn't talked about this stuff prior.
And what is this really? See, this is where I get to this whole issue of evangelism. Is it really about broadcasting these particular Christian beliefs and bringing people sort of into the church? Because religion itself is very cutthroat. And I say that because if you're a Baptist, you believe that Methodists are going to hell. If you are a every branch of religion believes that every other branch of religion, even if they're Christians, are all going to hell. That they're very cutthroat. I again grew up as a fundamental Adventist, and I absolutely guarantee you that Adventists, or at least the Adventists I was brought up with, believe that every Baptist and every Lutheran and every other one else who wasn't Adventist is all going to hell. That it's just some flavor of Satanism.
Mm.
So
I just want to say that it's not all
if-
equal either. There's some that are
Yeah.
really, harp on that, and there's some they're like, they're probably okay.
So do Satanists believe that everyone's going to heaven?
I think honestly, I think Satanism is probably, and I'm going to offend someone, but it's probably really more like a parody religion.
Yeah,
it's just a stick a finger up your nose.
So
Not exactly
So-
parody, but I don't think they believe anyone's going to hell or heaven. I think there's a
Oh,
lot of
interesting.
reality in there, but
okay,
I could be wrong.
all right.
It's
You guys
closer
really
to-
should get a Satanist on this.
So before we continue, I just wanted to say this. We're not entirely picking on Christianity here. We're picking on all forms of religion.
Yeah.
It just so happens this happens to be a Christian thing.
Well, and it's not a
Guys.
coincidence. It's not a coincidence
No.
because our nation is majority Christian. So if a Muslim coach had this prayer at half court, we would never have gotten to SCOTUS. That would just never have happened, because
That's
the only way this is possible is because so many people are Christian. So it's not picking on Christianity because of Christian beliefs, but it is picking on Christianity because of
Because
it
of the
being
majority.
exactly it being a majority religion. If the majority of people were Satanists, we'd still have the same conversation. It's just they're not. The majority of people are Christian. And again, I don't have anything against Christianity or their ability to practice it, but the question is that SCOTUS has done this effectively through a lie, which I think is a problem, because how can we expect like the Supreme Court is supposed to be operating on logic. It's supposed to be operating on inherent truths. And if they're doing so based on a lie, how do they expect that to be legitimate? How are we going to operate that this thing, which is based on an obvious lie, is a legitimate verdict?
Well, let me ask you a question. Like, when you're talking about making decisions based on logic, can you include your own religious beliefs? Like, can you use that as a factor to your decisions?
Well, but that's the difference between the public, the public secular and religious spheres, is that my religion applies to me, right?
Mm.
And this is where we're coming into a lot of problems, and why we're talking on today's show is that, when we go to the abortion ruling, when we go to contraception and some of these other things, it is my religion applies to you, not just personal. So like if this really were a short, personal, private prayer, we wouldn't be able to see it because he would be somewhere private, that we couldn't see, that unless he's taking a picture of himself praying in his own living room. That's it, is that when we're talking about the public sphere, we're talking about rules that affect all of us of differing beliefs. And those rules must be agnostic. They cannot be based upon being religious or not being religious. That's the Establishment Clause. The whole point of the Establishment Clause is that it cannot favor or disfavor religion. It is neutral.
Is there a possibility that we could actually like boot some of the Supreme Court justices if they revealed that they were making decisions based on their
why
religion,
I don't like
religious beliefs?
utilitarianism.
Okay, I grant you, utilitarianism's evil. No, not really, because the problem isn't the Supreme Court right now. So I think we need to walk away from that. Even though the Supreme
Okay.
Court's obviously doing weird things, the problem is the people, us, we people. This is why the show, we people are allowing this to happen. We are supporting politicians that allow this to happen. If we, the people, as a whole, as a majority, were to change the way that we vote and to insist on certain things. So, let's take, for example, the idea that 9 people alone can comprise the most important, unelected and lifetime appointment position in the world. 9 people for 350 million people. It's been that way since the 1850s. So over the past 150, 160, I don't know what years, I've had the same number of justices, but obviously 10 times as many people. So why is 9 people the right number? You know, and the solution that I like actually is the solution where we expand the Supreme Court membership to include all federal judges, and that we basically lottery in the 9 that will sit for any particular case. So you just say every federal judge is a Supreme Court judge, and we pick a lottery. You know, you just shake a thing, and out comes this name, out comes that name, and the 9 random people that come out of that are whoever decides this. Totally random. You know, now is it possible that you're going to wind up with a random assortment of, you know, crazy people? Maybe, but there's
Also, we could get them
also
all, we could get them all from the Rust Belt as well. So,
but also the thing is that because the next time someone argues against this case, there's going to be a new panel, a new 9 random judges. So every time someone brings this case up, they're going to have the opportunity to overturn the previous panel, right? So the only, what that does is it says that if you don't want the next group to overturn you, then you have to rule in such a way that leaves very little room for that. You know, which is to say that you have to be totally neutral, to do as little as possible, because you don't want the next group to just come around and, you know, just undo whatever you did.
So I mean, I see that it could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. Like you said, it's pretty much, you know, what's the saying? It's pretty much a crapshoot. And so it's just the lottery. So having said that, it is good. A good, I think it's an idea. I'm not really sure what the best idea is, but I do say this, and just rewinding to what you mentioned earlier. Can you base your logic on a life background like religion or faith, or not? I use the word religion and faith separately. Or
ideology.
Or ideology, exactly. So I don't think you can. I don't think that that we as a human being can separate our experiences from our decisions. So I mean, maybe you could on certain things, but there are, I think, certain things that we just can't separate ourselves from our own decisions. Having said that, I do believe that there are 3 bases to every debate or argument, and that's your ethical, your pathos, or your emotional, and your logic, which is logos, right? So you have your ethos, pathos, and logos, and these 3 things are separate concepts or separate ways of debating. It's very difficult to use all 3 from one person's debate. Usually somebody uses one form or another. You know, somebody will appeal to your emotions versus your logic versus, you know, your ethical things. Now, the definition of ethics, what is ethics, right? I mean, that definition is actually a little bit ambiguous, but I think everybody here knows what emotion or pathological emotions is, and everybody here knows what logic is. But what is ethics? Because I do believe ethics changes with society.
Well,
the whole show.
No, I mean, and going to this picture, the ethical problem here is that ethics is your responsibility to those people you have an agreement to, you know, to care for in some way, that you have some relationship with. And he is being unethical in this situation because he's using his position of power with these kids to create an influence for a religious purpose. Which, and I want to say this before I get too far, and that is that I don't think religion is all we're talking about here, because
That's
if
right,
it
we're
were
not.
if it were just religion, that'd be one thing. But I think that's a little bit more. That along with the religious side of things, we're also talking about things like gay rights. We're also talking about things like trans rights, rights of women, because all of those things kind of get rolled up into religion. So I believe that gay people are not equal to straight people because my religion tells me so. I believe that trans people don't exist because my religion tells me so, or that women have, should, I don't know, camp in the kitchen or something because my religion tells me so. So, even when you get to the abortion debate, then you get like I believe that in pro-life because my religion tells me so, despite the fact, of course, that the religion says nothing about it whatsoever. But it's all really just it's like retrofitted. It's like these societal ideas of the kinds of societal philosophy that we want to have are retrofitted into the religion, and that's really what's happening here. Is that he is broadcasting or indoctrinating these kids to, for example, be less tolerant towards gay people, to be less tolerant towards trans people, to be pro-life. Like that's all happening here, not just a prayer.
Yeah. So I just like to emphasize, whoever thought up the term pro-life, he should get an award. He should be promoted as a marketer because that is a great sell for something that is so cruel. Having said that, I'm not for the wanton killing of fetuses. That's not me. I don't think anybody is really. But there are certain circumstances where it may be necessary to kill a fetus. That sounded kind of harsh. I didn't mean it to sound harsh, but so having said that, to roll everything up, all of these negative aspects, because the history of Christianity has had a lot of negative aspects, hasn't it? You're talking about the Crusaders. You're talking about, all the things that happened in the Old Testament. And so there are a lot of negative things when it comes to religion. And so it's no wonder that the worldview of it is so negative. I would submit that there is another view to faith and camaraderie. It doesn't have to necessarily be Christianity. I think a lot of people find a lot of satisfaction and a lot of hope, I guess, in whatever form of belief they subscribe to. And I think that it should be everyone's right to be able to express it publicly. But just getting back to this picture, this is not a short, private, personal prayer. Okay, and so
again, it might be short, but it's definitely not private or personal. It's hard to tell from this picture.
Yeah, it is hard to tell. But having said that, does he have a right to do this on his own time? Does he have a right to for all those do all those people there have a right to go there and participate with him in the middle of a field if it was okayed by the school? Just taking it from a personal perspective, I guess, yeah, if everything was okay, yeah, I think it should be all right. Because it doesn't have to be a Christian prayer. It could be something else. It could be, go ahead.
The school did not okay this, by the way.
Okay.
The school, not only did they not okay this, they fired him for doing this.
Okay, that's how much this is not even a debate. This is not even a debate. He's trespassing and he's committing an act,
right, exactly,
criminal thing. So, but let me tell you something on the other side of this, okay? And this actually happened in 1995 in Aldrich Park at UCI. Am I allowed to say that actually? Anyways, at my college, there was a witchcraft ceremony in the middle of the park there, it was performed there, and I think it was okayed by certain officials. I'm not really sure on that, but I remember that it was reported in the school, the university newspaper about that. Now, there were a fair number of, I guess they're called friendly witches. I guess I'm not really sure what the proper term is, but
were they Wiccan or?
I'm not really sure.
I would assume that most witches are friendly. The same way most people are friendly. It's the same ratio. There's no special.
Yes.
Unless they're like a Klansman, then they're like, hey.
Yeah. So my question is, This is at a public. Well, I guess I don't know if universities are public actually.
Yes,
I don't-
UCI, University of California, Irvine.
Is
That
that
would
a
be
public
public.
university?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a public university.
Okay.
It's governed by an official that's appointed by the governor of California.
But I think the
Okay.
important part though is that person were they an employee of that university?
I
'Cause
don't know.
if they weren't,
I
it
don't know who
doesn't
they
apply
were.
to
I
them.
wasn't there. I just remember it occurring and reading about it in the newspaper. And I thought to myself, what kind of ceremonies were they performing in there? I mean, was it prayer? Do they pray? I don't know. But so you can see here that if it is a public thing and it's occurring, having said that, there was a lot of, I remember going there and there was a lot of rumors and speculation about, this type of dark arts occurring in Irvine in general.
Yeah, that's
But,
not really a witch thing. Just to put this in perspective, the word witch
Yeah.
really refers to wise elder, usually a midwife. Just putting it out there. All of this like satanic panic thing. That's you should watch Stranger Things for that. It's the 80s. It's what we went through. That's not
But-
true.
But having
Yeah.
said that, right? I mean, we make fun of it, but having said that, right? There are many people, if not, the majority of people who don't like Christianity. They also believe Christianity is hocus pocus.
People
So
can
I'm-
believe whatever
I'm-
they want.
Yeah,
that's-
and I'm just presenting that view that witchcraft, Christianity, Satanism, magic, it's all rolled into one as the same thing to a lot of people.
Sure, they're all religious beliefs. That makes sense. So I'm going to say one thing, then I'll turn it over to James to close. The one thing I wanted to say, just to point out before I forgot, was that this is happening with kids and in a school, but there's no reason, based upon SCOTUS ruling, that this couldn't happen with a judge or with a police officer, or what I'm saying, if you get pulled over and they're like, why don't you pray with me, and if you pray with me you won't get a ticket, or the judge says, okay, after the close of this court we're going to sit here and pray. So many different circumstances would just be completely wrong. I think we allow more of this because they're kids and because it's in a school than we would in other places, but there's just no reason why this couldn't exist in other places as well. So that being said, we're running out of time, so I'm going to turn it over to James for final thoughts. What do you think?
Covered a lot of good ground. I personally can't wait until a Satanist or other group of that caliber does something like this and people freak out, because that's going to happen. But I also wonder, like, how much of this, praying in public like this is like basically virtue signaling, like, oh, I'm a good person, look at me, I have faith. I think that's also a concern, like, but yeah, it's wacky.
Well, thank you for.
I agree with you. I agree. Just before we close, I agree with you,
Sure.
because there's no difference between this and the guy on a soapbox with a bullhorn, is there?
Except he's in a school doing it.
Yeah, and
You know?
he has a title and people look up to him.
Yeah, right. And
So,
you know what?
anyways,
And honestly, whenever we look at these cases, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say this, but like, how much further down the road do we have to go to before not this guy, but in similar circumstances, like how many coaches are pedophiles, or it's like the closer you get to I am such a fantastic person, admire me, it's also the closer you get to being some kind of really crazy nutbag, in my
Yeah.
experience.
but not this guy, right?
Not this guy. I'm not trying to slam this guy. Some other guy.